just kind of kicking off with those social. If anyone wants to share who they are and where they're connecting from, and what interests them in the topic, what interests you in the topic of Stoicism.
Could I just say something real quick before?
Yeah.
Well, I have missed your daughters for about a month. So maybe today, since I came in on time for a change, I'll catch your daughters giving you a hug, goodnight kiss or whatever, hopefully.
Hopefully. They'll be back later tonight. They're still at ice skating.
Yeah, beautiful daughters.
Thanks.
Hi there, I'm Sunny from Fort Lauderdale. I don't know much about Stoicism, but I always find your presentations enlightening, and I thank you for giving them. And it's nice to see you, Ginny.
Yes, hello, Sunny. It hasn't been a while. Good to see you.
Yes.
I'm saying hello to you from Florida. I just moved to Florida 2
Oh,
weeks.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Deerfield Beach, right next to Boca Raton.
Oh, we're just about neighbors. I'm in Fort Lauderdale.
You're in
Just
Fort
south of
Lauderdale?
you.
Well,
Yep,
we have to talk. We need to talk.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Garrett. Okay.
Great to have you guys connecting. Maybe we can start a Fort Lauderdale area FTI in-person meetup. Ginny, if you want to help organize.
Oh my. Where's it? Well, Sunny, we have to talk.
Yes, I'd very much like that.
Okay, great.
Well, I think Sunny is a great name for a person who lives in Fort Lauderdale.
That's perfect, eh? Yeah, I think so.
I try to live up to it. I try to be optimistic.
Yeah. And what a gorgeous day today was. Absolutely gorgeous.
This is why we live in Florida, Ginny, today.
Wow. Garrett,
now tell me,
Garrett,
in the middle of July, it's another thing.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Ginny, what made you choose Florida? You were in Austin, right?
Right, Katie. Well, it's because my daughter-in-law's got a teaching position at a university, Florida Atlantic University professorship. So, and they've been going back and forth for a year. She's been teaching down here for a year. And my son said, Mom, I need to move down there and stay with her, full time. So I said, okay, so then I'm going to follow you.
Okay, so I'm Trask. I am from Colorado, and we have blue skies almost every day here. It's beautiful. And we don't have any bugs, and I can go near the water, no alligators. When I lived in Georgia, I couldn't believe how many times I'd look down. I'm like, my God, there's one right there. I'm like, yeah. I got here, I was so jumpy. I went to the park with my future ex, and we were sitting on a dock next to water, and a bird landed, a duck in the water. Scared the living Jesus out of me. I got up, I was running back to shore because, I'm so used to everything that makes a sound. It's got to be an alligator. All right, so I'll stop with the weird voices. I'm a performance arts background, theater dancer, Cleveland, San Jose Ballet, Portland. I took philosophy in college with Tom Trologan at the University of University of Northern Colorado here. And it was beautiful. It's wonderful. I'm a member of the Denver Stoics, and I can't say that we always talk Stoicism, but we all talk philosophy. It's a wonderful thing. So that's why I'm here. We're going to learn more tonight about what I can be talking to them about.
Cool.
And that's
great
it.
to have you.
Good to meet you. You're in performing arts, eh?
Oh, yeah. See, with a performance arts background, we have many, many phrases that we say. Usually they end with, is there anything else I can get for you?
Anyone else want to introduce themselves and where you're connecting from, and maybe what interests you in Stoicism?
My name is Kelly Huang from New Jersey.
Perfectly balanced whole food diet. old school boxers.
Sorry, Kelly, I just muted Elaine. Elaine, just so you know, you were not on mute.
So can you
Go
hear
ahead,
me?
Kelly. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Kelly Huang from New Jersey, and I don't know much about the Stoicism, so Stoicism. So I just look it up quickly. I mean, you know, this philosophy is really familiar through my life. I've been hearing, here and there, but I cannot really clearly, uh, you know what it is. So, just quickly I looked it up, and it's kind of really fascinated, philosophy, the concept. So I'm really looking forward to knowing more about it.
Cool. Good to see you again, Kelly. And anyone else want to introduce themselves and what brings them to tonight's event and maybe where you're connecting from?
I'll speak
My
up.
name's
Yeah.
okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Really.
Oh, okay. My name's Michael Strasberg. I'm a member of the FTI. I've been a member for a while, and I enjoy coming to these meetings, and I enjoy our Sunday members meeting where we exchange a lot, learn a lot. I live in New Jersey, and I'm interested in Stoicism. I get a daily Stoic newsletter from a website, and I read it, and it gives me a lot of good pointers about how to live your life responsibly. But I'd like to hear a more organized presentation from someone who's, studied philosophy and understands it well.
Great. Thanks, Michael. I haven't actually technically studied philosophy at a higher ed in a higher ed environment, but I have done a lot of self-study in philosophy and gone to a lot of Stoic meetups and learned from them. So I think I've learned a lot along the way, but through non-academic channels rather than academic channels. But often by people who are just as accredited as a lot of college professors. Yeah. Douglas, you were going to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Garrett. I've actually been to several of these meetings. I find the topics extremely interesting. I do have an interest in philosophy, however, not really a background in it at all. I just enjoy, the pondering and consideration and all that. I have no background in Stoicism. I know very little about it, and I'm interested to learn a little more. And I forgot to mention, sorry, I'm actually from Washington State, a little bit south of Olympia, Washington, as a matter of fact. So
Cool.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming and for the kind words. Joe has his hand up, so we'll let him go, and then I think you wanted to talk as well. So we'll do Joe and then no? Okay. So sorry, I misunderstood. So Joe, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Joe from Philadelphia. I've been to several of these FTI meetups. I enjoy them. And I have studied Stoic philosophy as well as other Hellenistic philosophies. I think that we have a lot that we can learn from them for both our personal well-being and our social well-being. And I think that we can look at things like Epicureanism, even the Cyrenaics in certain ways, and draw from all those philosophies of life. But I think the why you do it, the ultimate goal, is the most important thing, and that's why I prefer Stoicism over maybe say something like Epicureanism or and that.
How do we turn this on?
Anyway, thanks for having me, Garrett.
Thanks for coming. Good to see you again. Yeah, well, go ahead.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I'm Will. I'm in the Sunshine Coast in Australia, East Coast, just down from the Great Barrier Reef. God save the King. And I am in a Stoics group here in the Sunshine Coast, and we meet in the botanical gardens every second weekend on a Sunday. We meet in the local botanical gardens, about 12 of us. And we we've just been going through Marcus Aurelius meditations, like verse by verse, and discussing it, which is really enjoyable to sort of give our opinions on what he's saying in the various verses. And we're about to go into Seneca, the letters, in a couple of weeks' time. And at the end of the meeting, we'll throw up, if anybody wants to volunteer, something that's happened in the last couple of weeks in their life and how they dealt with it from a Stoic perspective, which is really interesting. Like if your neighbor's turning their music up too loud, for instance, or somebody stole a car space from you at the supermarket, how you dealt with that through the Stoic principles. So yeah, very, very worthwhile. Great topic. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And yeah, I didn't get the chance to agree with Joe before, but I would argue there's definitely a lot to be learned from the ancient Greco-Roman philosophical sort of group of ideas. And I think Epicureanism is often misunderstood in the modern world. It's actually a lot more reasonable. It's not hedonistic. Epicurus was not a hedonist at all. Even though a lot of people sort of frame him that way, that's inaccurate from what I understand. That said, I'm going to let David go next.
Yeah, Epicurus was big on friendship and contemplating life, and spent his time drinking tea in a garden with his fellow Epicureans. So yeah, not exactly a debauchery.
No, he was a long-term happiness guy, not a short-term happiness guy. And so that's where I think he's just often mischaracterized.
Yeah. As far as, well, I'm in Toronto. And as far as Epictetus and his handbook and his discussions, the thing about Stoicism, to me, it almost also seems similar in a way to Buddhism in the sense of denying emotions, or at least dampening your emotions, and trying to live a life of acceptance of what is must be, and therefore accept it as best you can, which it's good, but on the other hand, it somewhat denies your the negative emotions that are also part of being a human. And I think in that sense it maybe is a little bit unrealistic. But overall, I think at one point in the handbook he says something to the effect, if your child dies, accept that it had to happen and don't be overly emotional about it, sort of thing, to paraphrase him. And that's a tough one. But on the other hand, it's a good read. It's a good kind of an overview idea of trying to accept your fate and handling it in a how shall I say, in a sort of a state of more equilibrium.
Equanimity, I think, is the
equanimity. Buddhist. Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So great, thanks, David. Great comments. And we'll let's get through. I don't have a long presentation, so let's let everyone socialize that wants to. Shaunak, go ahead.
Hey everybody. Just wanted to say about the comment, the last person comment about the fact about Buddhism or Stoicism. I don't know about Stoicism specifically. I won't comment on that, but at least on the Buddhism side, it doesn't necessarily say that to dampen your emotions. It's more about the acceptance of it. Let it happen to you. And at least from what I've read from meditations, at least from Marcus Aurelius, the way they talk, it does seem that, and this isn't like the common usage of the word also, he's very stoic. It feels like he doesn't feel anything, but I don't think the philosophy necessarily points to don't don't, no, the emotions will happen. The point is to not let them overwhelm you, or to accept the emotions as they come. Or if you've done mindfulness meditations, which is a, key core practice in Buddhism, it's which is very difficult. It's also, to accept things as they come, which is much more difficult than it sounds. But it doesn't necessarily say to repress those emotions. I mean, that's my studying from what I've studied about it. I don't know if
that's been accurate in what I've learned as well. And I discussed this with David another night. But yeah, I think that's an accurate depiction, Shauna, because it's not about repressing emotion. That's unhealthy. It's about accepting it and responding to what happens to you, not as an emotional response, but as a rational response, dealing with the root causes of the emotions rather than what the emotions make you want to do. And we're going to have another event on emotions specifically, so I don't want to go too much into detail on that, but we do have an event coming up. It hasn't been posted yet, but it'll be in the next month and a half on emotions. So Scott, I don't know if you had meant to put your hand down. Sometimes they go down without people meaning to put them down.
I was going to comment as well, and
yeah.
It's already been said, so I put my hand back down.
Okay, no problem. Andy, do you want to go next? You're on mute, Andy. Or actually, we just can't hear you. I don't think you are.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, other microphone that was muted, sorry. Yeah, I'm Andy. I'm from California. I'm an organizer for the Atheist Odyssey there. And I use philosophy, or I'm learning philosophy in terms of logic and reason. Also how it pertains to things like knowledge and understanding and how we do things. I have a limited understanding of Stoicism, or other forms of philosophy as well. And I'm here to learn, actually. That's what I'm coming here for. And I'm also curious as to how this is involved with MBTI.
So we post to a bunch of different meetups. We don't have a direct pairing to MBTI tonight, although I'm an ENTJ. But we post stuff to the MBTI group that's philosophically interesting. But yeah, if anyone of the administrators has a problem with that, we can stop doing that. But so far, I think there's not a direct relationship, if that's what you were looking for.
Well, I was just curious to how it related to this.
Yeah, I don't think there's a direct relation other than that there's a philosophical correspondence. But if you go to the FTI online community, we do have a channel for MBTI, and I'd love to chat with you about it there. We're going to have an event on the big five coming up, and we should probably do one on MBTI because I'm more of a fan of MBTI right now than the big five. But I'm looking forward to hearing Carl present on the big five to learn about how it can be leveraged more effectively. So yeah, but.
And can you possibly leave a link or something in the chat, or some information that you just said about where that will be and when that will be?
Yes, I'll definitely do that right now. So if anyone wants to learn more about the FTI, including the online community membership that Michael mentioned earlier, some people weren't here then, but any other information about the FTI, past events on YouTube, all of that stuff is in the link that I just put in the chat. So feel free to check that out. And there's also a mailing list if you want to be added to have a calendar invite on Tuesday nights. For our events, we meet most Tuesday nights, not on Halloween, but have to take my kids out for Halloween. So, but yeah, that said, thanks, Andy, for your question. And DLJ, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hello.
Hey.
All right. Yeah, actually, I did the Big Five test, or rather, a friend of mine made me do it. I scored 0 on agreeableness. Can you imagine that? something I have to say I completely disagree with. And I'm told that INTJs are the absolute worst people to live with. And I'm told that by everybody who's lived with me, because I'm an INTJ too, and that doesn't surprise you either, does it? I'm in the UK, non-Stoic, very much more to the Epicurean side of things. Stoicism always comes across as a bit too self-centered. I know it doesn't have to be, but it seems like that. So why am I here? Mainly because it's gone midnight and I'm having trouble sleeping. So I'm hoping you can put me to sleep with a really boring talk. Thanks very much.
I'll do my best, TLJ. Actually, I'll do my best to keep you awake, but that said, I may just put you to sleep anyway. So that said, that's a good intro to starting an introduction for myself. And we're going to kick off the event now. My name is Garrett Lang. I'm a software developer turned software inventor, now an entrepreneur, and my hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy. I'm also the executive director of the Free Thinker Institute, which is the organization that brings you tonight's event. We advertise to a lot of different meetup groups, but the FTI has regular events almost every Tuesday of the year, although we skip a few holidays here and there. And we're basically a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. We focus on helping members be the best version of ourselves, seek truth, and to be fair through transformational personal and professional development. We have not only these events on Tuesday evenings, covering topics not typically covered in academia or industry, but we have weekly members only events where you have to apply to become a member, where we apply practical wisdom into our daily lives. And we have only one rule in the FTI, and I will ask everyone to honor that one, and that is to remain polite. That just keeps us all calm, cool, and collected, and not responding emotionally, which is very salient to the subject of Stoicism that we were talking about. Is we want to not respond emotionally. Well, it's much easier to not respond emotionally if you don't get upset in the first place, and usually remaining polite keeps people less upset than when you get rude. And so we're going to try to all stay polite tonight. People have been very good about that in our events, and I'm really honored at how polite we've been discussing things as controversial as gun control, abortion. We hit all the really hot topics that usually make people very angry and upset, and we talk about them in a pretty logical way, and we have very diverse perspectives in the group, which is part of what I want to do, is bring people together. One of the things you'll see if you go to that link is the different reasons that I started the FTI, and one of them is to bring together diverse types of people so that we can understand each other's perspective, especially the people that we think are totally crazy. Let's understand their perspective better, because only by understanding their perspective and how they came about those ideas can we broaden our knowledge of how people come to conclusions that we can't possibly understand how they got to. And we call that listening to understand in the FTI. It's very much a cousin of Socratic method, although I think it's a little more polite and empathetic than the way Socrates did it, which ended up getting him the hemlock. But he really embarrassed a lot of very important, powerful public figures, which didn't work out well. So he didn't have quite the politeness, but he was one of my idols. So I'm not meaning to talk bad about him. I really liked Socrates, and so. That said, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the presentation, and Michael usually has something quick to say before I kick it off. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. We're just going to ask that when you have a thought, when you have a question or a comment you'd like to share, please remember it or jot it down, and don't say anything until the discussion part of the meeting begins, because we want to get through the material undisturbed so that everybody gets a clear idea, and then everybody will have their chance to say whatever they want to say.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So let me share my screen. So I am going to do a quick overview of Stoicism, but most of the time is going to be spent on the Stoic values, and I have kind of a pictorial representation that I created. This is kind of an FTI riff on the Stoic values. It's my own interpretation of the Stoic values. So I think I've added a little bit beyond what the Stoics started with, but the Stoic experts can tell me if I didn't. But I asked a friend of mine, Gregory Lopez, to look at the diagram that I created, and he felt like it wasn't 100% aligned with historical Stoicism. So that's what makes me think that I riffed on it, because he's much more of a knowledgeable person in Stoicism than me, and he's presented on Stoicism to the FTI before, and is an author of a book on Stoicism as well. So let's cover the agenda. I'm going to do a quick overview of Stoicism, and then I'm going to talk about the virtues, and I'm going to talk about them in two pairs. The first pair is temperance and justice, and the second pair is courage and wisdom. And then I'm going to show a summary diagram that basically summarizes the two pair of virtues all in one sort of cohesive diagram, with a little bit about how we can use it from a personal growth perspective, since that's a big part of what the FTI is about, is personal growth. And so I include that in the way that we leverage the virtues to grow personally. So core principles, Stoicism sees virtue as the highest good, and that doing what we think is right, following the 4 Stoic virtues, basically is what they say is right, is the key to a happy life. And I'd argue even one of those virtues really is the key to a happy life, but doing all 4 is the sustainable key. And then 2 is reason over emotion. This is probably why Stoicism resonated so much with me, along with Buddhism, as they both hold reason as the highest good. And so it's more about, logical and rational thinking is more important than emotional inclinations. And then, yes, people mentioned in the social, accept what you can't change. That's a key learning for me when I started going to Greg's Stoicism meetups, is the dichotomy of control or wisdom, part of wisdom, and separating what you can control from what you can't, and not worrying about the stuff you can't control. There is a gray line in between those two that I'll talk about in that virtue pair. And then living in accordance with nature. This is one where I sort of part ways with Stoicism in some ways. They were, I think, determinists, and they considered logos sort of well, I don't want to go into logos because I probably won't do it justice. Then we have a lot of Stoics here that will probably be able to talk better about it than me later on. But sort of accepting one's natural role into the universe is, in the universe, is part of what was thought of as living according to nature. But I'm a big believer in that we write our own destiny, and that we should use our free will to create the best life we can for ourselves. And I don't think Stoics would disagree with that per se, but some interpretations of live in accordance with nature might be able to be interpreted that way. So, and then mindfulness of the present moment is a key teaching of Stoicism. Then some practical applications. Stoicism can create emotional resilience. In fact, cognitive behavioral therapy traces its roots back to Stoic teachings, and has a lot of its roots there. So being ethical is really important in Stoicism, which I find I would love for the person that said that they consider Stoicism to be a little too egotistical or ego-driven. I forget how it was phrased, but I'd be interested to hear more about that person's perspective when we get into the Q&A, to understand where that's coming from, because like everything I've learned about Stoicism is that it's very pro-social, meaning that being a good member of society is really important to Stoics, and we want to be good citizens that are trying to be fair and just. I use fair and just as synonyms, and I think they generally are. And so I find that to be an interesting perception for someone to have about Stoicism. I'd be curious to know where that comes from. And then problem solving is, a key part of Stoicism as well. So that said, I'm going to go into the first of the 2 virtue pairs, and you'll have to bear with my slides. They're a little messy, but you'll get a sense of why. I created the graphics using DALL-E 3, which is an AI art generation tool. and they're fairly symbolic of Stoicism, and I'll go into that a little bit. So look at this graphic as, we're starting here from our comfort zone, and we're traveling in the direction north where this arrow is going towards justice. And so the two lines here, these thick black lines, are temperance. And so everything outside the line of temperance is, drunken debauchery, which you can see here. And so this is what happens if we're not, living according to temperance. I consider temperance the guardrails as we go from where we are today to seeking justice and trying to be as just as we can, justice being the North Star. And if you look at these heads here, these are the god of doorways and a number of other things, but his name is Janus. And you can see that one of his heads is fiery and angry and emotional, and the other one is kind of calm, cool, collected, and serene. And that's where the calm, cool, collected side is the side that we want to stay within the guardrails of temperance. And that fiery, angry one is the one we want to try to avoid, because I don't know about you guys, but when I make decisions out of anger, I often make very bad decisions. And so I try to keep calm, cool, and collected. And if I'm not able to keep calm, cool, and collected, I try to separate myself from whatever's frustrating me so that I can calm down and make better decisions. And so this here is the goddess Temperania, and she's holding a chalice and a bridle of a horse. Those are her symbols, and she is the goddess of temperance. So she's very symbolic here of these lines of temperance. And then these are the scales of justice, relating to justice here. And so this basically, is about why when we're making decisions, we should stay within the guardrails of temperance. There are many things that we can choose to do. And if we keep calm, cool, and collected, we will be much better, much more likely to make decisions that are just or fair, to use our ability to reason, because usually when someone is emotional, they're not reasoning really well, right? They're making emotional decisions instead of reason-based decisions. The way this has been described by books that I've read on the different parts of the brain, although there are people who challenge exactly how cookie cutter this sounds, and it is more nuanced in reality. But the simplified version for a 30-second interlude is that you have a logical part of your brain, which we're in if we're calm, cool, and collected, that can be hijacked by the emotional brain or the mammalian brain, which inclines us to make emotional decisions. That in turn can be hijacked by the reptilian brain, which is the fight or flight or pretend to be dead part of the brain. And so in order to keep to the most powerful and the most convincing part of the brain, and the one that tends to make better decisions for us, we want to keep within those guardrails of temperance. So this is really step number one, is stay within the guardrails of temperance in the service of seeking justice. But there's a little more to it than that. And so just to describe what we mean by justice and Stoic values, justice is also described as fairness, being impartial, unbiased. Equity, meaning taking into consideration needs and abilities of other people in the decisions that we make. And then honesty, being truthful and acting, doing what you say and saying what you do, type of thing. And then temperance is including discipline, moderation, and humility. You want to always recognize that you have more to learn by being humble and having an open mind, which is one of what we call the 5 intentions in the FTI. And these two sort of align with sort of intention number 2, which is to transparently share your beliefs with other people to the extent that you trust them, which is being honest and straightforward about what your actual beliefs are. And then humility, or listening with an open mind, is what we call it in the 2nd intention of the FTI, is having the humility to recognize we all have lots that we can learn from other people, especially those that we disagree strongly with, which is why we talk about listening to understand in the FTI. And then moderation is about avoiding excesses, like eating, speaking, and drinking too much. All of those are different types of excesses. And this sort of aligns with the Buddhist middle road. If you haven't heard of that, we should do one on Buddhism. We had someone come to speak about Buddhism a while back, but I may want to do something on that again, because it's a really interesting philosophy as well, as I mentioned earlier. So the next pair of virtues are courage and wisdom. And basically wisdom, let me just switch back and forth here and describe them. So wisdom is about grasping the nature of the world, what I talked about in my series on critical thinking about on knowledge, understanding objective reality, and being able to use your critical thinking skills, which is the third of the 5 intentions, is to be able to hone your critical thinking skills so you can learn to judge and discern fact from fiction, which is about understanding objective reality, and wisdom from folly, which is about making good judgments that are morally and practically sound. And sagacity, maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. I don't know how to pronounce it. So basically, applying wisdom into real world situations is a key part of Stoicism. It's a very practical philosophy. And that's where I think, the point made in the social about we have a lot to learn from the ancient Greco-Roman philosophers is really true. And they were all had a lot of practical applications. I think sometimes modern philosophy loses practicality, especially some thought experiments have no basis in practicality, like there's no practical application to them. And I don't find those super interesting. And so courage, talking about bravery is facing adversity calmly. Perseverance is staying committed, and tenacity, grit, you can call it what you will, but there are a lot of synonyms for the same thing. And the number one indicator of a successful person is this one trait: perseverance, tenacity, grit, fortitude. There's a lot of ways to say it, but then also doing the right thing even when it's difficult. And so that's where I use courage to say, we should get out of the comfort zone. And I'm going to describe the comfort zone, the growth zone, and the danger zone now. But I'm going to do so sort of, let me actually lay the groundwork for the dichotomy of control, which is a part of sort of aligned with wisdom, practical wisdom. And so the dichotomy of control is to separate what's within your control versus what's not within your control, and to only focus your happiness on things that are within your control, and only focus your effort on things that are within your control. Now, I take a little bit of a different tact than some people who have described for me how Stoicism took it, in that, I would say that while we can only control how we respond to things, that's true, we also have a sphere of influence in life. There are people who will listen to us based on our relationships with them. There are organizations that we may lead or run that take guidance from us, and that we're basically a role model within. And I think those things, as we increase our responsibilities in life, we can grow our sphere of influence. Now, I'm going to say this first graphic here is a woman being fed grapes, right? She's in what I would call your comfort zone. She's just comfortable. She's relaxed. She's not really growing and learning. She's just eating, right? And enjoying things. And that's what I would call your comfort zone. It's things that are easy to you. You're not feeling challenged there. Now, if you step a little bit out of the comfort zone, which takes courage, and so, you're basically pushing yourself in the direction of justice, hopefully, using wisdom, saying, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to look at other things I can influence. And I'm going to, be in a place that's uncomfortable, but in that place of discomfort, you're also growing, learning, and developing, and you're productive very often. And this is this image of a farmer, with a bounty crop and saying, hey, look, it's hard work to be a farmer and you have to toil in the fields, but you create the food that we all survive on. And so now that's kind of where the symbolism of this graphic comes from, is being in the growth zone where the hard work pays off. And what I would argue is that if you have too much courage and you try to jump ahead of what you're capable of, for example, this graphic has a senator or some ancient leader preaching to an audience of hundreds of people. If you've never presented to an audience of 10 and you try to jump right into this, you're probably going to be afraid and get emotional and not able to effectively communicate a message to a large audience. And so that, this was attempting to give an example of what I call the danger zone, where you're basically so far outside your sphere of influence that you've lost control. You're not learning and growing and developing because you're not capable of actually doing the type of behavior that you're attempting to do. That's when you have too much courage. And that too much courage puts you into the danger zone, and just enough courage keeps you out of the comfort zone and in the growth zone. And that's where the wisdom comes in to keep you, the wisdom and the courage kind of pair up. Is the wisdom says, I want to be, doing things within my control, which the growth zone and the comfort zone are, but the courage tells you how far outside of your comfort zone to go in the direction of justice to stay in the growth zone. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm happy to take questions about it afterwards. I'm going to also talk a little bit about what happens when we stay in the growth zone. And for that, I'm going to simplify the diagram a little bit. We have the comfort zone. And if you push yourself into the growth zone so that you're staying here in the growth zone, then what happens over time is that things that used to be in our growth zone start to become easier because we've started doing them on a regular basis, and our comfort zone grows. And so too does our growth zone grow, and things that used to be in our danger zone are now in our growth zone, and things that used to be in the growth zone are in the comfort zone. And so we need to keep pushing ourselves to try to do more and more challenging things. And as we do that, we grow our sphere of influence. And when we grow our sphere of influence, we can influence more people and things in the service of justice. Is the idea, according to Stoicism, is as we increase our sphere of influence, we should use that to practice our virtue of being just. And someone another week said, well, if you have a bigger sphere of influence, doesn't that mean that it's easier to be just? And I would argue, no, not necessarily, because actually, as you have more power, and they have that saying, right, is absolute power corrupts absolutely. It actually can become more tempting to be less just and to use that power to control others rather than to empower others. I have another saying, which is that power should be used to empower rather than to overpower. And I think that a lot of people who seek power to control others rather than to empower others. And I would argue that the ones that are trying to be just are using their power to empower others, and the ones that are seeking to control are the ones that typically get into positions of power in a lot of areas of life, although not all for certain. So that said, I'm going to show all of this kind of summarized into one simplified diagram, and I'm going to share the presentation slides at the end here, so that if anyone wants this diagram, you're welcome to download it and share with people. This is a printable graphic, which is a little more beautifully illustrated by my UX person than what I could do. And so you have the sort of drunk people who are fighting in the outside, and this is Bacchus. Bacchus is over on the right and on the left, actually. And the sort of lack of temperance out here on the outside. And then you have the grape eating person here, in this case a sallow guy, and and he is in the comfort zone, and then the farmer in the growth zone, and then the politician or the leader in the danger zone, although some leaders are perfectly within their growth zone or comfort zone. So not to say that all leaders are in the danger zone. And then how courage is kind of keeping us moving in the direction of justice and increasing our sphere of influence. And then these are some descriptors to sort of summarize these things, and how, all of this is where learning knowledge of the world and wisdom to make just decision making is really what this is all in the service of, with the symbolic pieces. So with that said, I put the versions of the graphic in here, and so you can download these if you'd like. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and not loading, but it'll load. So was this helpful, and do you have any suggestions to make it better, especially for the Stoics? But everybody's feedback is welcome. One of the things that is important in the FTI is that we don't commit the fallacy of rule by authority. Like, even if someone doesn't have a background or education in an area, they can still have a well thought out opinion in that area. I value everybody's opinion, whether you have a formal background in Stoicism or not. And so all feedback is welcome, and I would love for people to write in the chat whether or not this was helpful, and then if people want to raise their hands if you have questions or comments or anything else you want to add. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
No, I thought it was a very good presentation. I think that you captured quite a bit about the essence of Stoicism, which is obviously the pursuit of virtue, and focusing on the fundamental rules, Epictetus we call it, which is what we control and what we don't. One of the other important things that I think that is, sometimes overlooked, but I think it's a really important concept to understand, is that understanding that the unity of virtues, specifically, and how the virtues actually work together with one another. And so if we were to take somebody that were courageous, and if they were not just nor wise, that courage would actually then become a vice. So the virtue would actually become a vice in that particular instance. So because they would not be acting wisely. So this is part of the reason why you can't have a Stoic Nazi, so to speak, because it's not wise, it's not just, and so therefore you can demonstrate courage, but you have to be the other virtues that you have to be working in conjunction with the other virtues.
Yeah, I agree completely, and that's why I tried to present them in pairs, but sort of pairs that go sort of like two in this direction and two in this direction, because together the four virtues are kind of like a compass, and they can help you navigate all situations in life in some respects. And so I agree with you completely. And I tried to talk about that, and I apologize if I didn't do it justice, but the interplay is very important. That was my goal, is to talk about the interplay of the virtues rather than just each virtue one on its own.
And I think you used the right word. Compass is an excellent word, because it actually guides your action.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. Remco.
Yeah, hi, Garrett. Listen, first of all, I'm impressed by the depth and the quality of your presentations every time. You must, you're an amazing guy. Anyway, compliments aside, all my friends call me a Stoic. You are very Stoic, Rem, and I consider myself rather Stoic. But I personally think Stoicism is an abomination, to be blunt. I think Stoicism sort of creates this arrogance of knowing better, that you can sort of make rational conclusions and deal with the world immediately as it presents itself to you. That is my discomfort with it, that that we have this ability to relate based on internal evaluations. Somebody comes to you, for help, you make a rational decision and think, well, I can't help this person, and withdraw. One thing that was missing, by the way, just a little aside, I think one thing that was missing in your presentation, Garrett, it was Nietzsche's critique of Stoicism. He found that also, perhaps I've been radicalized by him, but he had some very strong points to make about it. I've got several pages on his critique, but he felt that, in the end, I would say this as well. I see Stoicism as like a religion. It gives you time out. It would suit people that claim to be introverts, because it's a very comfortable place to be. You can withdraw. It's like an opiate, like Karl Marx's opiate. It's fine for a time, but I think it's time to stand out and live life full and experience all the drama that life presents, and not to pretend that you can sort of say, well, look, this is beyond my control, and withdraw. And on a personal basis, so whilst I have some very good examples, I think the one for me personally, which expresses my discomfort with Stoicism, is that some years ago I was in a little Indian town, and I promoted a major cleanup. And then my good wife, after the support, I said I was going to withdraw. And my wife forced me to declare that that within 12 months, I would have 10 towns and cities also acting cleaning. And I did. Rationality was put aside. I just did it. And I think if you get into that mindset, just do. And that's how I live. I just do. And I will not try and evaluate and not try to judge. And I think overarching it all, I will never say no. I will never say no to any invitation with a little exit clause for unreasonableness. So that's a little snippet of my view. I could extend it, but that's enough for the moment. Thank you.
It's an interesting perspective, Remco, because it sounded like, if I heard you right, you were saying that that Stoicism makes you arrogant because you think you can make rational conclusions. So are you saying that human beings can't make rational conclusions? Is that your perspective?
Oh, look, it is not a question of evaluating. It's just that it's predicated on the belief that us humans are superior to nature. That's what I'm against.
Well, remember, one of the aspects of Stoicism I mentioned that's a core aspect of Stoicism is living according to nature. So I don't think it actually, Stoicism is all about living with nature and being, a part of nature and recognizing our place in nature.
Yeah, and Nietzsche makes a particular, I was just going to call it up, Nietzsche makes a particular point about he makes a very, in the between time, I'll come back later, he makes a particular attack on the claim to live according to nature, when we are nature. In his view, we are nature, and to claim to live according to nature is, look, I'll come back later on exactly what he said. So we are nature, so there's nothing to do. It is there. And remember, again, the Stoics are determinist. Largely, they have a little exit clause there, but they're largely deterministic. I'll come back later on that.
Yeah, I think they were essentially compatibilists, if I'm honest. They were determinists, and I think compatibilists are still determinists, but I think they were more compatibilists than hard determinists. And Nietzsche's critique of Stoicism was about master-slave morality, and even in Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche talked about how there would be free spirits coming from Europe that would transcend master-slave morality and come up with a new set of morals. And I would argue that there are many of us that are a part of that free set of spirits. And I think a lot of it started with Bentham, which interestingly, is largely rooted in Epicureanism, like a proper reading of Epicureanism. That said, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next one, and then Remco, if you want to respond, definitely put your hand up and we'll come back to you. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, we all come across things that we can't control. And especially in introversion, you don't withdraw. You come into a conclusion about how to get around it. It's not about withdrawing from being faced with something that you can't control. It's about coming up with a solution to get around it. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I would agree with you. Like, introversion does not mean that someone is necessarily less courageous than someone who's an extrovert. It's just a matter of where you find your energy comes from. And so, I think that's where there's a lot of misunderstanding. And there was a good book called Quiet about introverts and the power of introverts. And I always try to make sure that, I used to like to do breakout rooms. And actually we could do that tonight. Maybe let's give a number of if people want to do a breakout room, I'd be open to putting people into a breakout room that want to do it. I used to feel like it was all or nothing. We had to either do breakout rooms or one big room. And then if we got a volunteer to moderate a breakout room or two, I'd be happy to have people do that, because that gives introverts more of an open place to speak. And I find that when you give introverts a comfortable situation where they can speak up, they often have the most valuable things to say. I say that as a former introvert, admittedly, but now I'm an extrovert, so I guess I'm no longer biased to be saying that. But yeah, that said, I'll go ahead and let Joe go.
Yeah, I mean, just to maybe address some of the things that, some of Remco's concerns. I don't see it the same way. I'm not fully aware of all of Nietzsche's criticisms, but I know that he did have a criticism that the idea that it was a living universe. And not all the modern Stoics actually necessarily even share that idea. And so that is one part of it, is that Stoicism evolves. So that's where I think there's a lack of arrogance. But number two is, I think the more important thing is that there is this constant misunderstanding when it comes to Stoicism, that it is actually a passive philosophy. And nothing could be further from the truth. The only way that you actually live a eudaimonic life is if you pursue virtue. And so the idea is then that you take responsibility for what you can control. And then once you know what's in your control, you're actually supposed to act justly. And this improves our social relations, doesn't take away from them at all. And I think that even the idea of this, we tend to forget about the idea of Stoic cosmopolitanism all the time. And where a person sees themselves not as a citizen of a country, or even, they see themselves as a citizen of the world. And that this is something I think incredibly powerful. And I think that it actually even aligns with the FTI's values, in that it doesn't give way to groupthink or tribalism. So that you're actually thinking for yourself and saying that I'm going to do what's right, what I believe to be right in this particular instance, despite what the group may be doing. And so I think that you're not necessarily drawing boundaries. You're actually thinking about yourself as a human being first, rather than somebody that's part of a group. And I think that that's a great deal of autonomy that comes with that. That there's other aspects of it where one of the fundamental elements, when people call it the idea of religion or anything, it's rational in nature. So that I don't know if that really fits into the category of a religion per se. I think that there are other philosophies of life that are much more quantitative, that actually claim to be maybe have the world a little bit more figured out. Lastly, the living according to nature consists of two things. It consists of rationality. It also consists of pro-social. And the idea is that we're pro-social because we actually do not survive on our own. We've evolved as a species by essentially working within groups and cooperating. So therefore, you're supposed to at least work within some type of framework. Again, not compromising what you believe to be the right thing to do, but at the same time, you're still maintaining a role in society. And there's a whole set of role ethics that go along with this. But I just see that it's often mischaracterized as this passive philosophy where it simply goes counter to actually what Stoicism is all about, which is the pursuit of virtue, not the some internal withdrawal. That I don't know how people come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. Like, and that's to that point, actually, Remco, if you look at your first quote, Nietzsche is saying that Stoics live without pity or without pity or justice because they're living in accordance with nature. But one of the four Stoic virtues is justice. So, we're actually very much striving for justice and saying actually that nature itself is very often just. And I think Nietzsche looked at nature as indifferent, and that might have been where his misunderstanding is that he was assuming that nature is indifferent. I don't think nature is indifferent to everything. Nature often has a sense of justice in and of itself. In fact, such studies showing that animals often, there was a study about monkeys that were given, what's it called, the treats, and the study folks gave the monkeys treats at different levels of fairness, and the monkey that got treated unfairly actually threw the treats back at the person and said, I'm not going to take your treats if you're not going to be fair. And so I would argue fairness is an attribute of nature, and that all creatures who can make free will decisions actually have some sense of fairness inherent in them. And that said, I'm going to let Scott go next.
That's just the statement that there is justice in nature it's not something I've really thought of much before, but I don't barring the examples you just made. I mean, I feel like nature is very cold and brutal, and I've always looked at, when we talk, for example, about human inclinations for rage or violence or hypersexuality or whatever it might be, that we cite that's our DNA and that we're programmed that way. And I've always viewed it as for us to transcend those, right? We're trying to become something other than nature in a way. So this is going to sound really bad, but like we're reaching toward the divine, and that's kind of a dangerous statement, right? Because you don't want to aspire to be God, but there is this kind of, I feel like what humanity is about is transcending that cold brutality or that cold machinery of nature.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think nature can be indifferent. I'm not saying that it can't be indifferent. Like, if you take the seasons, for example, if you go out into winter and you have no jacket and you have no food and you just keep wandering into the forest, you're going to die, right? It's not going to just suddenly bring you berries and fruit in the middle, in the middle of the forest. But that's not, again, to Remco's point of like barring reasonable, exceptions. Like, I think that we have to, keep things within the realm of reason. But within the realm of reason, I agree with you that we should be truly, I think reaching towards the divine is a good way of putting it. And that's why I put justice as the North Star, because for those of us that believe in a God, I think God is, very just. And I think, trying to be as just as we can be is a good thing to strive for. The Stoics said there's never been a Stoic sage that was perfect in all four virtues. So all we can do is strive to be as just as possible. If there is a Stoic sage, it's God. And I don't even know if God is a Stoic sage, but I don't know that much enough to be able to opine on that. But that said, I do think that we're trying to transcend a lot of bad habits. So I don't disagree with you there. And I wasn't meaning to say that all of nature is inherently fair all the time, but I think that all like creatures with free will have a sense of what's fair and what's unfair, and generally, do make some effort to be fair. But I think we have more ability to influence what is done fairly and what's not done fairly than other animals on Earth, right? We're the high guys on the totem pole right now, and so yeah. So I don't know if that makes sense.
May I react to what you and Scott just said, please?
Yeah, and actually, Ginny, if you don't mind me just letting people know, if someone wants to respond to I generally want to help everybody feel heard, and so I respond to people that speak up. But if someone else wants to jump in, as Ginny just did, she did exactly the right thing to just speak up and jump into the conversation. So, Ginny, I'm going to let you go, but I just wanted to let other people know that that's a part of our format, and we forgot to announce that. I forgot to ask Michael to make that announcement before I started taking questions. So, my apologies.
You both more or less just said that nature can be cold and blah, blah, blah. But in my opinion, it's more about your perception. And because if nature was not out there to provide food for us, whether it be fruit, grain, whatever, we would not be able to exist. So I think it's the way you decide to perceive or accept nature for what they are. So again, it's your decision. But I tend to see nature as warm and caring and takes care of us for providing us with food and all that.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between like a Stoic versus a skeptic. The Stoic will say live in accordance with nature, which means, plant your crops and make enough food that you can last it, that it'll last through the winter. That's living in accordance with nature. Living in accordance with nature doesn't mean that the crops will grow themselves in the middle of winter and you'll be okay, right? That would be unreasonable and not living in accordance with nature.
But then the nature is themselves are trying to survive by growing when the atmosphere is right for growing. So they're also trying to survive.
Although Ginny, maybe you think that nature is so nice because you live in Florida where it's always really okay, just teasing. So
okay, I like teasing. So humor is always welcomed in my life.
Yeah, agreed. So thanks, Ginny, for your comment. And Remco, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at the chats as we were talking, and Jacob is making a few comments, and I think I think they're very apropos. I think they're very much the sort of the essence of what quantum mechanics. And in a way, relativity theory, because after all, they're the two essences of reality, are saying to us, who's doing the observing? Is the observed the observer? It's another story in itself. But, it was interesting that the conversation this evening included a discussion about MBTI. And that involves a self-assessment of being an introvert and being an extrovert. And remember, again, that's why I'm under discomfort. It's a self-assessment. And, can you self-assess? And I have some serious problems with that. And I would introduce Gödel's theorem on that, if that makes sense to you, Garrett. But look, I think the whole process is whether you're part of nature, if you are nature. And if you are nature, can you make that distinction? Can you really think that you can override nature as it evolves through rational thinking? I think not. Look, in my 10 years on Earth, I look back at myself, at all the experiences, all my mistakes, all my suffering, all my consequences for what at the time might have seemed like wrong decisions. They have made me who I am. I've become more robust. Even the process of being angry, being saddened, all the discomfort has helped me be who I am. And it gives me I feel an amazing comfort with the world compared to where I was in my early 20s. I'm prepared to jump in and declare, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound to be self-promoting myself, where I began to talk the story about where I started with a small Indian town and it ended up with Prime Minister Modi, the Prime Minister of India, declaring what I stood for, my clean India. That is what you can do. And you can get beyond the rationality, because the rationality would say, hey, you don't speak Hindi, you live in another country, you even have a discomfort with the Indian culture, as I once had. So all of these things. So just jump in, experience the world, get burnt and scorched and discomforted, because in the end, you'll become a far more relaxed person. And as I said, in the end, where I am today, I will never say no to any invitation, even to the absurd. I've had some really absurd invitations, and I won't go into detail, but hey, they were wonderful outcomes. And I'm just enjoying life. I'm enjoying life today like I've never enjoyed before. But hey, I will not practice superiority. I will not better guess what other people are saying. If you invite me, Garrett, or anybody here, invite me. If it's reasonable, I'll give myself a little exit clause. Yeah, if it's reasonable, I will say yes. And that is the end of the story, full stop. Sorry if it sounded like I preach, but I'm very passionate about this. I'm very passionate, and I don't see any room for me to adopt a religion, which is what I see Stoicism to be. Anyway, that's my bit.
Interesting. I'll be interested to hear. We have a lot of hands up, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I'd be interested to hear why you think Stoicism is a religion, because I don't know of any church of Stoicism. There are a lot of us that are trying to learn about it and help provide practical advice to each other, leveraging the wisdom from Stoicism. But there's not really a lot of dogma in Stoicism.
No,
even the Stoics themselves
ritual.
disagreed with a lot of the primary, ideas of Stoicism. There are some common things that all Stoics agreed with just about, but there's a lot of diversity even amongst ancient Stoics. So and that's accepted because reason is the highest good, and so ultimately you want to trust each individual's ability to make sense of which Stoic are they going to follow, right? And different Stoics have different Stoic leaders that they liked more than others for those reasons. So yeah, but I'll maybe if you want to respond to that later, if you don't want to now, then that's fine. Then
yeah, it's all about ritual. I am that I am, and I don't want to sort of program my head with some rituals, which is what Stoicism is inviting me to do, right? And that is what I rail against. That's really what I rail against, Garrett. I don't want.
Then you really must have concerns with the Catholic Church. They have a lot more rituals than Stoicism.
Sure. Look, I don't want to get caught up in little semantics.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
I just live. All right,
yeah.
I will live, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just funny because Remco, as you describe what you do and what you say, it aligned with all of the things that I talked about tonight. And that's why I think your friends might call you Stoic, because I think that in practice, you use a lot of Stoic wisdom in the way that you act in the world, but yet you don't like Stoicism, which I find really an interesting, but that's because you're a postmodernist, I forget. You can live with that juxtaposition of ideas and have contradictory thoughts in your head that all make sense to you at the same time, even if they contradict each other, right?
They're contradictory to you, not to
yes,
me. You see.
Correct. Exactly.
And that's the point. And I think if in that presentation on Wittgenstein, remember what he said: he who understands me and has climbed the ladder will discard the ladder. And that's a very powerful statement. In other words, you will see the world rightly, as he wrote. It's a stepping stone. I mean, I would suggest Stoicism is a wonderful stepping stone, but once you need to be able to transcend it. And I think that transcendence is where the freedom comes. Go through it if it suits you. It will give you comfort. It will give you a way to connect with the world. It's wonderful. I might be very harsh on it, but in the end, let go of it and be yourself. Feel the world. Anyway, that's my bit, Garrett.
So Remco, what you're saying here sounds a little to me like how can I say this? Okay, so like for example, in Taoism, right, when they say that once you try to describe, and I don't know how familiar you are with that philosophy, but right, once you try to describe it, right, you've attached yourself to this fixed set of rules and protocol and you create a system, a man-made system, right? And you've just lost grasp of the very thing you're trying to experience. So I think kind of what you're saying is that when you try to codify Stoicism and kind of like make it this set of rules and do this and do that and like be, you know, then you've kind of lost it. Is that kind of what you're getting to?
Yeah, look, it's a transition. It's a bit like when you take an antidepressant. It's time out. An antidepressant takes you out of the current world, gives you some time out, like a holiday, and you can sort of regroup, find yourself, and then you wean yourself off your tablet. Stoicism is like that for me. So yes, I'm fiercely stoic. I've done some absurd things like riding a motorbike for 5,000 kilometers with a broken leg. And I did it against all the doctor's advice. That makes me stoic, I suppose. But I got out. It was a victory. It was an amazing experience to come back, have my leg put into plaster when I arrived back into town. Wonderful. I thrived on that.
Not
it's
sure I would
irrational.
call that stoic. I would put that in the danger zone personally.
Yeah, some might call that unreasonable. But
yeah, I would call that.
I would agree with doing it. I salute you for doing so.
Now I'm curious what your unreasonable exceptions are to, you know, when you get invited somewhere, Remco. So I guess I have to invite you to New York City to have some wine together at some point. So, you know, we'll have to manage that. Jameson, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Garrett. Jameson, I've got as much formal education and training on philosophy and psychology as anybody else who has a 4-year degree in a university. I take more of a omnist perspective. I know I was listening to other people talk about Stoicism and, you know, whether it's mindfulness, which can be traced back into Buddhism and other belief systems and ways of thinking. I would kind of view that same way of Stoicism, and particularly with the concept of nature and trying to find our place within nature. Because like someone, you know, immediately defaulted to God, and you know, people, because we are, what is it, anthropomorphic, our natural inclination to think is nature would obviously be produced by something that was similar to us in the fashion of a God. So to even assume that there was a God versus trying to just determine, well, in nature, if I was in this world all by myself, what would be the best thing that I could eat? It may not be the tastiest and the best, but I would live the longest. And what would avoid me from breaking all my bones or getting eaten by an animal? I would kind of perceive that as being like an ideal or a God's way. And then, of course, when you add the factor of other human beings in the mix, and as you alluded to, that people develop bad habits over time. So now we're kind of untying little Gordian knots of people's bad ways of thinking that have persisted over millennia. Yeah, I think that God's way would be, you know, looking at all that and splitting the hairs on like your critical, whatever your decision supporting in those three. What were the spectrums that you cited?
You mean the Stoic spectrums?
Yeah, well, your spectrums of if a leader is in the danger zone and this person is in this particular within their.
Oh, the comfort zone, the growth zone, and the danger zone.
Right. So you would, you know, the analogous to if you're a living creature, forget even being a human being, living in this world, you're going to want to stay in a particular zone. And then when you start employing your mental faculty as a human to decide how you can affect the world outside of you, then you've got to put it in context of both your constraints in nature and then those that other humans place against you. And then, of course, those within yourself. Like if you're too short, you're not going to be a basketball player. So, you know, it doesn't matter what you think that you can do. But that's kind of how I digested your conversation thus far about what your approach is. And I don't know what the NTJ, that personality discussion kind of referred to when we're talking about the Stoic philosophy, and or you know, riding your bicycle with a broken leg, or even rituals, because brushing your teeth would be, you know, constitute a ritual. And I want to follow the ritual of brushing my teeth because I don't want to fall out. And just because some Stoic 1,000 years ago didn't cite it, and they encapsulated in under the names of particular people, and then labeled a certain ideal school of thought, and then now today, when it's saying to engage in these repetitive behaviors that are going to make you live healthier and think more positively or better, people have all these weird misconceptions. So it's interesting. It's been an interesting conversation. I appreciate what you're talking about.
Great.
I got a lot from it.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think, we also have to take into consideration that Stoicism, was around 2000 years ago that it was come up with, and that's a long time to have wisdom still have a lot of practical value. And I, still, like I said, cognitive behavioral therapy is largely rooted in Stoicism. That's pretty practical modern science that comes from an ancient science, or an ancient philosophy. So I think there's a lot of practical value to Stoicism even today, even to people who don't like Stoicism, like Remco, that I think still live according to, and Joe mentioned it as well before he left, although I can't always read what's in the chat comments. So just so people know, if they mention me in the chat comments and I don't respond, it's probably because I didn't get the chance to read everything. I'm very focused on what's being said. So that said, Andy, why don't you go next?
Right. So I don't really see myself as a contrarian per se, but I've heard several things here that I want to be contrarian about.
Yeah.
Somebody said something about nature takes care of us. I think we're looking at it backwards. Nature doesn't take care of us. We evolved to take advantage of nature. So I think we're looking at that backwards. And, a lot of animals will modify nature to try to make their lives better. Birds build nests, beavers build dams, we walk on the moon. Somebody else also said we shouldn't be inspired to become gods. Actually, I think we are becoming gods. I think we don't walk on the moon because we inspire to be rodents running around trying to feed ourselves. This is kind of what we do. Even if you look at the Old Testament, the Tower of Babel, this is what God said. You're trying to become like us. You're trying to do great things. We have to change your language and stop you. I'm not trying to say that's a real story, but this is kind of the image that all along we have been aspiring to be gods. And I think this is an important factor. I think we need to embrace that.
Yeah, I'm not sure who you're referring to about the aspiring to be God. The person that I heard said that we should aspire to be God, like, as fair as God hypothetically is, and that we should aspire to be more godlike. But the idea about nature, not taking care of us, I guess, I think this is one of those chicken to the egg sorts of things. Like, I think by saying nature takes care of us is to say there's fertile ground, there's plentiful water, we can grow crops, and we can, live, in accordance with nature if we want to, and that only works as long as we continue to live in accordance with nature, because if we poison all the fresh water on Earth and we don't have a good way to purify salt water at scale, then we'll cause massive amounts of human death. And so living in accordance with nature, I think, I think there's a give and take, and probably you're right. And I think it was Jenny that said nature takes care of us. I think she's right as well, where we, leverage nature in collaboration to take care of ourselves using the sort of resources that nature has given us, including, other animals and plants and, sun and, all of the things that are a part of nature. Does that make sense? That maybe there's not one right or wrong answer there?
Possibly, but the truth is that nature exists. We came and evolved into it. So we're taking advantage of nature, and now we're even going further. We're genetically modifying plants so that they become insect resistant, so they become more nutritious, so they become more things. So we can also pollute water and stuff like that, but we can also learn how to filter it, and we can, we're understanding these things. So we are modifying nature to take care of us. So originally we were modified to live with nature, and now we've stepped over the bounds to actually we're modifying nature to deal with what we want. And I must have misunderstood, because I thought that inspiring to be God was being said is that we shouldn't do that. So I misunderstood that.
I was the one that made that comment, and I was really just trying to. I didn't mean from humanity necessarily, but from an individual person, right? There's one can develop a God complex if they point themselves in the wrong direction, and that's all I was trying to clarify on.
Okay, yeah, and that's I kind of agree with that. I mean, but I think in a sense, as a species, as a race, we are becoming gods, like gods. At least 2,000 years ago, we sit there with a cell phone, they'd be amazed.
Great.
Although I guess I would argue that my only argument would be how we define God. Is it a watchmaker kind of thing where there's an echo going on?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from. Okay. So
Thank you.
There was an echo from you, so I just muted you.
Yeah, anyway, so that definition would be like God is the clockmaker, right? And so even if we drill down to the level of like DNA, tampering with DNA and whatnot, it's still kind of we're modifying things and constructing and building, but others would define God as something kind of different from that. And so it would be more nebulous, I think, not just the watchmaker example. So that's my only point of distinction there.
Great. Thanks, Scott and Andy, for the conversation. And Trask, now your turn.
All right, we'll see if I create an echo on myself.
Nope.
It's my, I've got two devices running. So that's what it was.
Oh, no, maybe it's making an echo for me, but not for you.
Okay. There was just concerns about religious things and about Stoicism from Remco. And I thought maybe that was going to lead, his conversation was going to go into an interpretation of the word logos, which didn't happen. And then as far as self-determination, I believe is part of what we do in order to enact anything and make anything happen, whether it be ethics or working on our virtues, or whether it's just, going out and fixing something. If you don't actually get out and do it and nothing happens, even Simone de Beauvoir made comments about that right after World War II. She was like, well, women, this is your opportunity to stand up. We've been working in the factories. Well, you have to take action to make that happen. And without action, nothing happens. So is nature really taking care of us? No, we are taking advantage of, and if we do not actually take action, we do not actually survive. So I don't believe that nature is taking care of us. It's just that we have learned to apply ourselves and find the resources that are available and take advantage of them. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Trask. I would only say that I think there's a give and take of, yes, we take advantage of the resources that are there, but nature does also have a lot of resources there for us to take advantage of. And so that's why I say it's a chicken or the egg problem, because we did evolve on Earth. At least most of us think that we evolved on Earth. And so, having evolved as a part of nature and branched off as a part of nature, we are leveraging, our own origins, the nature that originated us, but we're also finding ways to make it better and make it work more for humanity. But we also find ways to mess it up, right? By polluting streams and, poisoning drinking water and things like that. So I think, there's a sense of nature isn't going to come, wrap us in a blanket and put us to bed at night, right? Like I do for my kids, but there is a give and take in that nature does provide resources for us, and we also help make those resources more advantageous for us. Does that make sense? That there's a little bit of
I
both
have
going
to
on?
argue with the question. You're using the word provide. Nature provides, and I would say that nature, you're providing an animistic quality to nature and giving nature an intelligence factor. Now, I'd be willing to argue that that might be the case, because that might also be my opinion. However, at this point, I think we should keep that neutral, since there's no way to prove that. Correct? So why
there
is
might be,
nature
but I could be better at
providing?
disproving it than proving it. But I think we're talking about a semantic difference here rather than a substantial one. So I don't want to dwell on it. I'll see that you're right. I'm not intending, or that the way that I said it had the implication you said, but I didn't mean that implication when I said it. I just meant that nature exists and we take advantage of what nature has to offer. But I would say that, I don't know that the person, I think it was Jenny, that said that nature takes care of us. I don't think she meant that nature is a sentient being taking care of us. She just meant that, we need to live in accordance with nature, because if we poison every well that exists, we won't have drinking water. And, we have to, be reasonable in the way that we leverage nature. We can't, consider ourselves all powerful when, we could destroy the very essence of what allows us to survive on Earth.
Well, maybe it's semantics that we're dealing with.
That's what I think it is, Jenny.
Yeah,
So-
because I can't imagine how a human race would exist without nature. I mean, so in the way I see it, I use the words they do provide to us, that they do take care of us. I mean, so again, it's the language semantics, I think.
Yeah, I think what if I were to rephrase what you said, Ginny, is that because nature exists, we can survive, meaning like without the resources that exist within nature, we wouldn't be able to survive. Is that a fair restatement, Ginny, of what you were saying?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Garrett.
Thank you,
Garrett.
So I was agreeing with
So
Ginny
certainly
from that
that's actually
perspective, having
factual,
sort of
right? I
channeled
mean,
her
that's,
and
that I can't, nobody can argue with that. I'm just trying to point out that we could have been a silicon-based life form. And then what are we going to avail ourselves of? Do you see that we are availing ourselves of what is here? Things evolve. I do not believe that we were created. I don't believe that there's a sentient anything involved with this creation. 98,000% of the universe is completely inhospitable to any life form that we've ever thought of, besides possibly silicon life forms. So what are we taking advantage of? Or is it nurturing us? I don't think it is. We just happen to grow here, and now we have to learn to adapt and live with what is here. We are adaptable to it because we came from it.
Yeah, you should check out our video on aliens. You said 98% of the universe is inhospitable to life as we know it, except for silicon-based, which leaves an exception of more than 2%. If you look at how big 2% of the universe is, even the known universe, and I would argue it's probably much bigger than the known universe, like that's a lot of potential for life. So to think that we're the only planet in existence that has life is a little bit unfathomable to me. But that said, that's not tonight's subject, but you may find it interesting to come to that, to check out the recording of that event when it gets put up on YouTube.
And silicon is far less reactive than carbon, even though it's on the same line on the chemical the chart.
Got it. I'm not able to have a good opinion on that, but I'll let Remco go next. Go ahead, Remco.
Thank you. Some good perspectives being raised, and I love the Free Thinker Institute for stimulating. And even if we don't agree, I'm sure we come away with a slightly different view, and as a result of the opposite views that we might hold, or at least whatever. I thought Andy said something useful, that to aspire to be gods. And I think that's a useful thing. I mean, that's also what Nietzsche also talked about, and he gave it the unfortunate label of Übermensch. But to aspire to be gods, and what if all we needed to do to be gods is we have to shed some of the nonsense that we've absorbed over the millennia. I mean, think back, the rationality that we talk about for the ancient Greeks. I mean, it comes back. It goes back 2,500 years, 500 BC, and before that it was an undivided world. But around that time, we started to become rational, and it created narratives. And we're still living under this shadow of these ancient Greeks, and still sort of trying to hold on to this separateness. And I think, you know, the whispers, and it's a topic in itself, if I can hint at a topic for you, Garrett, is to look at what quantum mechanics and relativity theory are saying, or if you like, not by interpretation, let the greats speak, let Niels Bohr speak, let Albert Einstein speak, and see what they're saying. Listen to what John Wheeler said. He was a physicist, American professor of physics, and graduated more PhDs, or supervised more PhDs than anyone else. He talked about a participative universe. In other words, we're not separate. That's hard to take because our conditioning, the very I-ness of us, and I listen to it, you know, there's a whole spectrum of I-ness when I listen to people here. And there are some that are devoutly I, very strong I am in the world. And with that conversation, you evolve a rationality. And I'm hearing also some others that are more gentle on the other end of the spectrum. So to become gods, yes, but just don't get seduced by the idols that you're creating. That is, all those wonderful technologies that we're evolving, because they often come at a price, and that price is often not available, not always visible and tangible. We are disturbing, and yeah, we're creating So look, I may have gone off on a tangent here to you, Garrett, or perhaps to some of the others, but it all to me comes back to I-ness and to the extent to which you want to keep yourself separate. If you really want to keep yourself separate, become a rational Stoic, but learn to wean yourself off it. That's my suggestion.
To become separate from what, Remco?
From the world around us.
So again, the Stoics said to live in accordance with nature, so we should be in tune with nature.
Yes, they say that, but then there is a qualification, and all of those qualifications is what I am concerned about. That is that you make an evaluation that these are things beyond my control, and therefore I should stand aside. Right?
So
you're asked to make controlling decisions all the time.
For example, you know, we can't make the day 30 hours long. Should we lament all day that we can't make the day 30 hours long, or should we accept that the day is 24 hours in length?
Well, you can always create, you know, sort of, I'm sorry, I don't want to deprecate what you're saying there, but you can always create little examples like that. But look, if somebody comes to you with some proposal, you know, or a request, or the community is doing something, I suggest don't evaluate it, just participate. Allocate your time according to how you feel at the moment.
So you're
Give
saying
yourself the freedom.
Don't evaluate the pros and the cons or whether or not it's a good idea or bad idea. Just either do it or don't do it without thinking through it at all.
I think you somehow know. I think one of the things that I've found, and I've only recently, and I've been humiliated over this. I've only recently, in the last few years, accepted that I am predominantly intuitive. My processing happens subconsciously. I deluded myself that let's use Kahneman's thesis, that I was system 2. Or in McGilchrist's thesis, that I am my left brain. That is the conscious part of me, but it's a very minor part of me. And it's the predominance, 95% of my processing, my thinking happens without my awareness. I've had to accept that, and I rejected it for all of my life at my cost.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Remco. I think Jonathan Haidt would agree with you that most people he would say they make emotional decisions rather than rational decisions. But you seem like you know, until we get into postmodernism, you seem like a very rational decision maker. But as soon as we start talking about postmodernism, you start to come up with a different perspective, which I find really fascinating about you. But that said, you're starting to delve into our session 2 weeks from now, where you're going to present on postmodernism. So I won't delve deeper into that mine, but I'll let David go next.
Yeah, I think Remco is a doer. I'm the opposite. You know, I think Remco's sort of raging against, you know, there's a thing called the Hamlet syndrome. You overthink and underact. And I think he, you know, would rather act and, you know, let the thinking take care of itself, or like he just said, he's intuitive. Whereas me, I'm one of these Hamlet guys. Oh, to be or not to be. Well, should I do this or should I do that? I'm not going to do anything. You know, I'll just discuss philosophy. But anyway, that's the only point I wanted to say as far as Remco is concerned. You know, there is this thing called Hamlet syndrome, which is a known psychological syndrome, and it's based on Hamlet, you know, to be or not to be. And he you know, he's kind of, he can't do anything about to revenge his father's death at his uncle's hand. Anyway, that's by the by. But I was just thinking about fairness. You know, we were discussing, is nature fair? And I don't think, like the word you used was indifferent, and I really think that's true. I think, you know, nature, and in fact, a lot of the animal kingdom, who are not social animals, who don't have the mental capacity to be aware of fairness, because fairness implies the capacity to seeing others as equals, to sort of be empathic. And I think without empathy, fairness doesn't occur to the animal. You know, like a lot of animals could see other animals being killed and would not have a moment's sadness, or, you know, feel any kind of a pain from that. Whereas humans and monkeys, we're social animals, we have empathy. And I think that's where we get our sense of fairness. I don't think nature has any fairness built in at all. It has a lot of quantum mechanics and relativity, and it has all the other physics built in. But I do not think that fairness to each individual entity, be it a planet or a human, is built into nature. I think empathy is the foundation of fairness. I think only certain sentient beings, shall we say, have that. So that would be my thinking about fairness, which is really the reason I wanted to say something. Thank you.
So I would recommend looking into the research on rodents. There have been studies on rats that show that they're often willing to share food rewards equally when they're working collaboratively, and they'll even hesitate to eat a food reward if their partner is not getting one. And so,
well, they're social. I guess they're social animals, would they not be? I don't know. I mean, I don't think, like any non-social animal or a social animal without some mental capacity, such as ants. I doubt very much ants get, you know, feeling other people's pain or feeling other ants' pain. Mice, you know, maybe they're in, you know, they've got some socialization skills. I think their mental capacity may involve the ability to have empathy, you know, because they are, you know, mammals. They're in our kind of a, you know, they're in our chain, you know, primates, and then below them, you know, like mother rabbits and their baby rabbits. Is it an automatic response to protect the baby, or is it empathy? Anyway, my point is simply that there's a lot of nature that isn't empathetic. For sure, you know, there's a lot of animals that are not, and trees. And, you know, if a tree sees you getting hurt, it doesn't react. There are people who believe that trees are sympathetic to each other, but, you know, I'm a little dubious. But anyway, the point is, a lot of nature, most of nature, I'd say, is non-empathetic, and therefore fairness is just not part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we would have to do some sort of study, like we'd have to look at studies of animals that show that they're not fair. And we also have to take into consideration that our perception of fairness may not be their perception of fairness. They may have a different way of measuring fairness than we do. So, you know, I hear you, and all I'm saying is that I think fairness is probably shared by more animals than we normally would give it credit for. And I'm not saying that it is a cold, hard, fast rule that every being with sentience is fair. And if I'm I might have said that. I didn't mean it for it. I didn't mean for it to be a cold, hard, fast rule, but more that I think that fairness is a, certainly a like shared amongst animals with higher intellectual capability, and
Yes.
probably shared by even some that don't. Like cleaner fish is another example of, not very intelligent life that does have a sense of fairness.
Well, they'd have to be pretty cognizant that, okay, that's another creature like me, and
Right.
therefore, it should be treated equally. The two of us should be treated equally by the rest of the universe. That takes a fair bit of mental capacity, which it goes along the mammalian chain down to mice,
Right.
perhaps, but
I
it
think
doesn't. Anyway.
I think if we can agree that it's in more than just humans, we at least have more agreement than a
Yes.
lot of people.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree.
so
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, for sure. Elephants, mourning and not, the other elephants dying, even if it's not their own baby or whatever. Yeah, I mean, for sure, empathy is not strictly human. It's also other parts of the animal kingdom. But you have to have a fair capacity in order to have empathy, to have the idea of fairness.
Great. Thanks, David. Rachel, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, doing well. I just wanted to speak on that, David, because I don't necessarily see how like emotional capacity is necessary for this idea of fairness. For instance, my mind goes to mycelial networks and how I don't really know everything behind it, but like something about if a tree needs resources, then it can figure that out. Other trees in surrounding area can figure that out and send it like whatever it needs to get it back to life. Like that seems like a very, I don't know if I would call it even fair, but reasonable thing. And I guess I'm just confused at, I also had thought during your presentation, Garrett, that like I thought about a courtroom where lawyers weave these intricate stories to try to get people to feel emotion about the cases that they're presenting. And therefore, we're not using justice. We're not using reason even. We are using emotion in those settings. So I guess, yeah, I don't really see I don't see how emotion relates or pertains to justice, especially, in terms of Stoicism.
So to take an example, and I gave this example in, I guess, like if I'll give a statistic, which is that 90% of conflict comes from misunderstanding. And what I see happen very often, especially online when people are chatting via text, is two people will be having a conversation and then one will say something that the other perceives as an attack, even though it wasn't meant as an attack. And then the first person will respond emotionally and attack back. And that's like revenge is an emotional instinct, right? To get back at someone because they did something wrong to you. And so I think the desire for revenge, leads to that old saying from the Bible is an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. And so that's what I'm referring to as emotional decisions are generally, emotionally inspired decisions are generally bad decisions. And when we use the emotion rather than a rational perspective to decide on doing something, I find that those emotional decisions are usually the ones that I end up regretting. And if you have like examples of an emotional decision that you've made that you thought was better than a similar, like a rational decision-making process, I would love to hear of an example where you feel like emotions make a better decision for you than a rational decision.
I think we're definitely in agreement. I think that's why I brought up the courtroom argument, where I don't think it's fair that lawyers can persuade people to side with, really it's just a story, not the facts that are there. So yeah, I agree that emotional decisions should not prevail, and that I think is a good part of Stoicism. But yeah, I think more so my thought was trying to make sense of what David was saying.
Got it.
With like the animal kingdom and not feeling quote unquote empathy and how that pertained to Stoicism.
Yeah, and I mean, he may want to respond to that, but you know, I see where he's coming from in that the idea of fairness needs to help have like the elements of this is what one person, one entity deserves, and this is what another entity deserves. And if you can't like have the cognitive capability to know that this is what this one deserves and this is what the other one deserves, then he's saying, how can we think that they could be fair? Is that right, David? Yeah, and I think
Yes,
your point about go ahead.
Yeah, you have to recognize you and that other person or that other animal, if you're a mouse, are the sort of similar, and that mouse will feel the same things you do. And if it gets something and you don't, you're not happy. And if you get something and it doesn't, it's not happy. And so to have that amount of awareness takes a mental capacity that a lot of things such as trees don't have. I read the book Supernature back in the 70s, where they argued that plants talk to each other, and if you sing to your plant, it'll grow better. I personally don't think that's true. None of that's true, But on the other hand, trees do get ill if a noxious plant grows near them. So they do interact with each other in that sense. But on a mental level, I don't think so. That's too woo-woo for me.
Yeah. So David, one thing that I would encourage you to look into is what Rachel was talking about is the resource sharing between trees. They've actually found that older trees will actually share resources with younger trees through underground networks, which are like fungi Latin networks. And in doing so, they give up resources that would help them grow in order to help the younger trees grow more successfully when those younger trees are being shaded out by the older, the older, wiser trees. Okay, now I'm gonna anthropomorphize trees. Sorry, I'm just teasing there. But the truth is those older trees, like, if it's really everyone for themselves, have no reason to share those resources, like, with the younger trees.
Well, this is Dawkins' argument about genes and, like altruism. And so, maybe the species of trees survives better where old trees naturally do something chemically. But my argument is not that trees don't interact with other trees or plants don't interact with other plants. My argument is simply that they do not think about fairness and how that little plant nearby needs some of my food. They don't think like that. They don't think. That's my point. And in fact, a lot of animals don't think about other animals. We're social, and maybe mice are social, and monkeys for sure are social. So we've gained that capacity and the genetic disposition to be social, and that involves being empathetic. And that, because of empathy, we then can consider fairness. I think fairness rests on empathy, personally.
David, could I just challenge that thought and say, could you also define empathy as like a way of relating to another?
Well, relating to another is a bigger concept. Empathy is a more specific, I think.
Yeah,
like you could argue through gravity, every molecule in the universe relates to each other, but that's not empathy.
So maybe relating is under the umbrella, or empathy is under the umbrella of relating, but not all empathy is relating.
Not all
relating is empathy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's it, Rachel. Now we're on the same page.
Because I wonder if you're trying to humanize or anthropomorphize something like animals' ability to relate to one another, when that's not, like, yeah, they don't have the same mental capacities because they're trees or whatever, or ants, but it's not that they can't empathize in the way that like nature would empathize. It's just not empathizing, in the same sense. But I don't know. I do think fairness is definitely possible in the nature or the animal kingdom and in nature, because I think nature does relate to each other. So it just, yeah, it just looks different than how we relate to one another.
Yeah, I agree with you with the idea that everything interrelates with everything in the universe. You could argue, you know, on a physical level, physics basically suggests that, you know, but when you know, you can't broaden a term too far, or it loses its meaning. Empathy has a certain, you know, narrowness of meaning that isn't the same as saying things relate to each other. So, you know, you gotta. I don't think the universe has, you know, rocks and mountains don't empathize with each other like, you know, mice and humans. And I don't think trees actually empathize in the sense that we're talking about. They interact with the plants around them, just like the mountain interacts with other mountains on a, you know, physics way, gravity, for instance. But they don't empathize with each other, I would argue.
I guess I could give an example of maybe what Rachel is talking about, where myself and another furry little animal was standing somewhere and a large predator appeared and started moving towards us. We probably would both relate on a couple different levels, both biologically, and then if we both witnessed personally someone we loved getting mauled by that kind of a creature, we might relate, you know, interpersonally, even though, you know, that's a little free animal that's got mauled by that creature. But, you know, my speaking dad got mauled by that creature. He would definitely probably relate emotionally on that topic, and probably, you know, empirically, like that is a predatory creature that's going to tear me up. So yeah, I would definitely, you know, empathize or relate. I don't know what, you know, I don't want to split hairs on the definition of the word empathy, but yeah, relating to emotionally is something that I'm pretty sure that I could do with any creature that was going to eat either one of us, and we both started running in the opposite direction.
I would agree with you. You can empathize with the little mouse, poor little mouse getting eaten. I don't think the mouse is gonna particularly worry about you getting eaten, but you know, for sure we worry about cats and dogs, and you know, I think you could empathize with the mouse. I don't think the mouse is gonna worry about you getting eaten too much. It'll be scared, so it'll just run. But I don't think it'll be thinking, I hope that human gets away as well as I do.
Well, I don't know. If you think about like your pet, your little furry dog, you know, it yelps and it barks usually out of fear and to notify people around and notify other creatures around it. That's kind of like a social response, possibly, unless you think it's some kind of involuntary sound it makes. But
dogs are pretty social. They interact. I'm not saying there's no such thing as empathy. I'm just saying it's limited to social creatures, put it that way, to creatures of a certain mental capacity. And like I said, there's no equivalence between the mouse worrying about us and we worrying about a mouse. I mean, I don't like to see a little mouse being played with a cat, right? You know, but I don't think the mouse, if it saw a lion playing with me, would say, oh my God, that poor human. I think the mouse would just be scared, run away, and not think about me. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I'm not going to run an experiment on that one, David, because I like you and I don't want to see you eaten by a lion. So
me neither. That wouldn't be fair.
Good, then we're on the same page there.
I would curse the universe for doing that.
But David, in the interest of science, maybe probably not.
Well, in the interest of science, okay. All right. I mean, how much is my life worth anyways?
So anyone else have questions, comments, things that they wanted to bring up?
You asked for an example of an emotional decision. Would be better than a rational one. I think the lion scenario might be a good one, unless you're saying that nature doesn't love us. Oh, hang on. Back to that.
I mean, depends on how well that lion is trained. I've seen people put their heads in lions' jaws, so some people can manage it. So we also are taking requests for, I'll put the FTI link in again for anyone that didn't see it the first time that wants to learn more about the FTI or membership or anything like that. I'll mention briefly some upcoming events. We will not have an event next week. Next week is in the US Halloween, and I'm on daddy duty to take my kids with my wife out to trick-or-treating. So I won't be able to host. And then oh no, that's not next week. Sorry. Next week
Yeah,
is
it's
the
2 weeks.
24th. I'm getting confused. So next week is going to be Remco on decoding the multiple truths, postmodernism unleashed. He's going to do a presentation on postmodernism. We weren't able to get the last one recorded, so we're going to repeat it so that I don't know if it's going to be exactly the same Remco or will there be differences. I don't know if he's still there. He may not be. But it may be a little bit different. I think he was tweaking the presentation. And so we'd love for people to join us next week for postmodernism. The week after that will be Halloween, and we'll be skipping. The week after that will be whether or not how like are emotions rational and how do we best deal with them? And I'll try to give answers to those questions. That was one of the 100 most difficult to answer philosophical questions when I Googled the most difficult philosophical questions to answer, which I did a while back when I was, acting as my usual glutton for punishment and looking for difficult challenges to go after. And so I have an answer to that, which you guys can decide with your own critical thinking skills, whether or not it's one you want to agree with or not. That's what we do in the FTI. We use our own critical thinking skills to decide what to agree with and what not to. And then the week after that, we're going to have Carl present on the Big Five and how to use it to lead a more authentic, purposeful, and fulfilling life. And then hopefully the week after that, we'll talk about, we'll have a panel on racism, classism, sexism, etc. We had a discussion on it a while back, but we're going to do a panel it'll have a unique bent special to that. So those are some upcoming events. If other people have topics they're interested in, feel free to write me in the online community. Always taking requests for event topics. So we sometimes come up with, like, in conversations here at these events, people bring something up that that I think would make for a good topic. Often I've already written something about it, and not always, but often. And so if people want to make requests, please feel free to do that. I'll also put my email in. Sorry, I just sent that as a DM. It defaults to that. Someone asked me if I'm dressing up for trick-or-treating. I am. We had a family Halloween party, and so I got a costume for that. So I'll be going out dressed up, and I'll try to send a picture in the online community of my my costume. And other people would love for other people to do the same if anyone's dressing up. But my kids are young, so it's a lot of fun to dress up, and Halloween's my favorite holiday, so I enjoy it. So anyone have any other requests for topics that people want to, maybe we could just brainstorm, topics that are of interest to people, since we kind of ran out of Stoicism comments.
Wheeler, somebody mentioned Archibald Wheeler. He's a famous physicist. He was a guy that said, if nobody's looking at the moon, it's not there. It's only there if we observe it, which I'm a little dubious of good old Wheeler, but that's just a real aside. Carry on without.
No, I think that brings up, I wrote an essay on objective reality, and I think that would be a good subject. Simulation theory. I don't remember if we talked about simulation theory. I'm going to look up whether or not we did.
Somebody mentioned, the mathematical universe by
the holographic universe by Deepak Chopra, I think.
No, this is the mathematical universe by.
If I can just say that Wheeler's his insights are probably accurate when talking about birthdays. if you don't celebrate a birthday, if nobody's around to celebrate a birthday, do you rage?
That must be what's going on. Yeah, you're right.
Kay has her hand up. Go ahead, Kay.
Thanks, Kara. Thanks, everybody. I find that when speaking with individuals who study and practice Stoicism, they like to talk about it a lot. So it just seems odd that no one is right now. I missed a portion of the event because I had to go to another. And I also find that a lot of people today, their attention span isn't great. So I was wondering if with the rest of the time, if you'd be willing to summarize all the points made or the major points of Stoicism, please.
The main point is just to give a very quick summary. You know, our North Star should be justice and fairness. Temperance should keep us within a calm, cool, collected mindset so that we can stay acting in the service of justice and fairness. Courage should keep us outside of our, wisdom in the dichotomy of control should keep us, knowing what we can control and influence and versus what we can't. And that courage should keep us outside of our comfort zone into the growth zone, but wisdom should prevent us from having so much courage that we go into the danger zone. And so the danger zone is where we're trying to influence things that we can't influence yet. And so that's the very quick Cliff's Notes version, as I like to say.
Sounds like ISTP.
ISTP?
I found out the Mathematical Universe is by Max Tegmark. Is a fairly famous book because some people believe the universe is like either a simulation or it's math. It's all math,
Yeah.
Information theory. Max Tegmark.
So I had an event on this topic about simulation theory, and if my argument is right, which I presented that night, the whole concept of whether or not it's reality or not is totally irrelevant, because the winning strategy is to treat it as if it's real, whether it's a simulation or not. And so, I find simulation theory far less intellectually interesting until since I came up with that argument, because I think it's a fairly convincing argument using game theory. And so, if the reality is irrelevant, then why worry about it? Because now I say that's out of my control. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to do the winning strategy, whether or not it's a simulation or whether or not it's real. And so I just
Einstein would also agree with you, because he would say that it's an unnecessary complication. You can explain the universe the way it is right now without any talk about simulation theory. It's a whole other addition that's not necessary to explain. So the simplest explanation that accounts for all phenomena is probably, in Einstein's view, the best one.
That's Occam's view. Occam came up with
Occam's razor. That's actually right. Yeah. He was an Occam. Yeah, he thought Occam was.
Yeah. I'm not meaning to contradict you. I'm just saying that Einstein got it from Occam.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. He was the first guy. He was a minister, a monk, I believe. Occam.
I think so, actually. Yeah, that sounds right.
He sat in his little cell, and Remco will hate this. He'll sat in his little cell without doing anything, just thinking about things.
Any other topics that people are interested in while we're brainstorming? Well, if you have them, write me in the online community using Discord or via email. But I just want to thank everybody for the great comments and contributions tonight and questions. It's really fun I love these Tuesday night sessions because, I always learn from them as well, even if I'm presenting. And so I really appreciate everyone's diversity of opinions and comments and just contributions. So thanks everyone for coming. Hope to see you next week. I want to let me just give you the link for next week so that you can sign up if you haven't signed up yet. I like to try to do that now, and that way you can come see Remco. Bear with me 1 second. And also we have an event in New York City for anyone in the New York City area. on Saturday, so I would love to see people. And it's still located at the wrong place. I'll get that fixed relatively soon, but shoot. Here we go. So this is the link for next week's event. So I'd love to have you guys RSVP there at the FTI meetup page. And thanks again, everyone, for coming. And hope you all have a great rest of your night or day, depending on where in the world you are, or late night for DLJ. Thanks for staying up, man. Like I can't stay up this late. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Garrett, as always. Wonderful topic.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.